I'm going to introduce a completely different smell after Ros, so be warned. I want to start. This is lovely, isn't it? Because it's the shadow of the chandelier and my little candle, perfectly designed. I'm just starting with a little quotation, which I hope you will remember, because I think it just sums up everything. Light, God's eldest daughter, is a principal beauty in a building. And this was written by the preacher and divine Dr. Thomas Fuller, who lived from 1608 to 1661, in The Sacred and Profane State. This was a series of sermons published between 1642 and 1648, right through the English Civil War. He was referring primarily to the planning of windows and room use in daytime, which can be appropriately illustrated by Emmanuel de Witt's beautiful evocation of light in a Dutch bedchamber of circa 1660. This is an interior with a woman at the Virginals in the Museum Boijmans van Beuningen in Rotterdam. But his words are pertinent to the subject of this short presentation about historic lighting in a nighttime bedchamber. But anything I have to say on the subject has to be preceded by a huge safety warning. Lighting in the historic bedchamber could be very dangerous. Rowlandson's depiction of an inn on fire, published in August 1788, describes very well the chaos caused by what is undoubtedly a bedroom fire and various unusual attempts to extinguish it. Robert Southey, in his Letters from England, published in 1807 under the nom de plume of Dom Manuel de Espriella, commented on the dangers in English homes when servants were careless, because he said, "For nothing but candles are used to give light for domestic purposes, and accidents happen from a candle which could not happen from a lamp," by which he meant an enclosed oil lamp. "The accumulation of furniture in an English house is so much fuel in readiness. All the floors are boarded, all the bedsteads are of wood, and all the beds have curtains. I have heard of a gentleman who set the tail of his shirt on fire as he was stepping into bed. The flames caught the curtains, and the house was consumed. You may easily suppose this adventure obtained for him the name of the Comet, because he was seen tearing down the street with his shirt tails on fire." And 1807, the year of Southey's publication, witnessed the Great Comet seen across Europe from September to December and measured by William Herschel, and the subject, as you can see, of much humour. In 1834, a government report recorded 471 fires in London, of which 36 were caused by accidents with candles, 74 by bed curtains catching fire, and 22 from window curtains set ablaze in the same way. I hope you're getting the message here. The drama of Mr. Rochester's near immolation from burning bed curtains, described so dramatically in Jane Eyre, which was published in 1847, was realistic to the contemporary reader. Although oil lamps and gas lighting were available by then, by and large, the English remained faithful to candles for the bedchamber, thus avoiding bad smells, smoke, and hissing noises. And even as late as 1986, a candle is believed to have been the cause of the terrible fire at Hampton Court, which started in the bedroom of Lady Gale's apartment. She was known to use candles, but she was also a heavy smoker, and sadly she died in the fire. So vigilance was essential wherever candles were lit. No candles were left burning unattended, and it was the constant duty of servants to see that they were well trimmed and extinguished whenever a room was left empty. A few effective extinguishers were available. I rather love this one, which is in Harrogate. However, ingenious methods were used to attempt to prevent the Comet situation. And this is a cruder version of the candle in water that Ros showed us so elegantly a moment ago. This is, again, a Rowlandson scene of the housebreakers, published in 1788. And a lighted candle stands in a bowl of water, so if it falls over, you can see it on the left-hand side, in the brouhaha that is about to ensue, the chances are that it will be extinguished safely and the bed curtains saved. Do notice, incidentally, the huge brass lock on the door. This charming image, that it encapsulates the approach of nighttime at Coatheel in Cornwall, is Nicholas Condy's lithograph of about 1840 of the anteroom, which is now called the punch room. In late evening light from the west-facing windows and with a crackling open fire, the table beneath the windows holds 9 stout brass candlesticks with large drip pans to gather excess wax, and ready to receive candles to light family and guests up the stairs to their magical bedchambers beyond. And the last members of the Edgecombe family to live at Coatheel remembered it for its deep mystery, its low light levels, and its romance. No electricity, spooky nooks and crannies behind the tapestries. Wood only burns in the great fireplaces, the flames flicker upon the old furniture and the dim tapestry. And you slept all over the place. The only bathroom for the children was one in the solar behind the tapestries, and they used to come trooping across the courtyard in their nighties with their little candles, looking like wee Willy Winky. So there was no electricity in the house. And Lady Hilaria Gibbs recorded this in an interview by Jeremy Pearson in 2000. Artificial light, before the arrival of gas or electricity, used oil lamps or candles. The downside was that they were dangerous, smelly, expensive, and generally inefficient by our standards. The upside was that the colour they gave was warm, they were versatile, and often very beautiful. Materials, this is very basic, and some of you may be familiar with it, consisted of vegetable oils such as walnut or olive oil in southern Europe, rapeseed or colza oil in the north, fish oil for maritime communities, often the poorest, and whale oil, spermaceti, which could be used for candles, as was beeswax until the introduction of paraffin wax in the 1870s. Or tallow, that is, animal fats from beef, mutton, geese, or pigs. The chances were that unless you could afford the best wax candle, your bedroom stood a strong chance of smelling like a McDonald's or a fish and chip shop. It's important to remember when considering the quality of candlelight that even the best wax candles were burnt unevenly and shed far less light than modern versions. And you can see the contrast here from these rolled beeswax candles, modern ones on the right. Wicks needed constant snuffing and trimming to prevent them dropping burning candle wick onto floors, and large saucers or trays were required to collect melted wax. Schalken's portrait of William III at Het Loo shows an uncontrolled flame dangerously near the fringe textile just visible on the right of the picture. It's important here because the wicks were very loosely woven, unlike the modern plaited wicks, so they burnt fast and unevenly. And the amount of light provided by a single candle, approximately 1% of a 60-watt light bulb, only travelled a short distance and gave a poor yellow light, even with good wax, and tallow was even worse and very smelly. But such lighting also provided elegant mystery for the bedchamber. On the left-hand side is a little print. I'm afraid it's very battered. I found it in a cardboard box outside a shop. It shows it's a scene from a play called The Jealous Husband. You can see what he's up to. And she is writing a letter to her lover by her chamber stick, her nightlight, to give to her maid. But the light is really only travelling about a metre and no further. And I'm fascinated by this because although it's a rather decayed picture, it shows the amount of lead in her makeup. Her face is so white, and it also has this reflective quality from the metal on her face. This is never expressed more wonderfully than in Jane Austen's description of Catherine Morland's curiosity and terror over the mysterious cabinet in her bedchamber in Northanger Abbey, published in 1817. I'll leave you all to go and reread it again because it's just such fun of the Gothic horror. And I love this postage stamp because it's a very accurate description of a japanned cabinet on stand. You can see her little chamber stick on the chair in front of it, and the denouement with the laundry list on the right. Now, this brings me to discuss with you not just the challenges, but also the careful planning of artificial light for historic bedchambers in order to maximize the power and dramatic effect in rooms that were obviously intended to look at their very best at night. And this intriguing view of a French bedchamber of circa 1690, which is now in the V&A, gives us much information. The room is a challenge to light, given the density of the tapestry on the walls. The key pieces of lighting equipment are, of course, the large mirror set between the windows, in effect the nighttime window of the room, angled to cast light downwards, a stand for a candelabrum, presumably one of two beside it, and a gilt sconce pinned to the panelling beyond. Note the absence of any lighting equipment near the richly hung bed, and no chandelier. All lighting equipment for the bedchamber needed to be at a height where it could be managed swiftly and safely. Attaching candle sconces to fixed furniture was the safest way to provide light, particularly near mirror glass, to provide maximum reflection, such as this overmantel mirror at Durham Park. And Francis Hayman's sketch of a rather rowdy scene, and from another version of The Jealous Husband of 1741-2, which shows candle sconces attached to the mirror frame, safely distanced from the bed hangings, and a little chamber stick on the chair to the left. Most expensive lighting equipment for grander houses and families would have been of silver or silver gilt in these households, and would therefore have been carefully stored in plate rooms, ready for constant cleaning after each use, and only carried into and away from rooms as required. NB National Trust. I get sick of going to houses where candles have been left slightly bent and sad, in chandeliers, in sconces, in candlesticks, when they should have been removed and only put there for use. End of growl. So they're listed in plate inventories and not in the listed contents of chambers. For instance, at Montague House in Bloomsbury in 1746, they're listed in the Groom of Chambers room and not in the inventory of the chamber itself. In that room, there were 7 pairs of snuffers and their pans, 21 pairs of candlesticks, great and small, 2 hand candlesticks, presumably chamber sticks, and at least 12 branches with 3 sockets each for attachment to the walls. 4 pairs of silver fireplace dogs are also listed there. Now, this made for a versatile system where light could be enhanced according to the season, to the requirements of the room, its decoration and its use, and moved easily between rooms. Isaac Ware pointed out in 1752 that rooms with dense textile hangings, such as tapestries, required more candles than those finished in stucco or oil-painted panelling, which had a more reflective surface. For the toilette set, candlesticks were nearly always included in the equipage, but if you look carefully at the Countess's levee in Hogarth's Marriage à la Mode, I'm afraid I haven't put a picture up for you, but you know it well. It's a morning scene, and you will notice that the candlesticks are not on view, I presume being reserved for evening use. While for most occasions a maximum amount of light was needed to impress, there were other times when the solemnity of a family event might need a different impact. The formal nighttime procession to the marital bedchamber in this early engraving, with this huge and wonderful, rather phallic candle leading the bride towards her husband. More fun than the rolled-up stocking, I think. Also the immensely elaborate arrangements following a funeral in a royal or aristocratic household, when not only the deceased, but also the nearest relative would be suitably dressed and would receive members of the family in deepest mourning. Lady Louisa Stuart recalled her mother's remembrance of the archaic mourning reception performed by her widowed step-grandmother, the Duchess of Kingston, in 1726. It's behoved to see company, that is, to receive in person the compliments of condolence which every lady on her Grace's visiting list was bound to tender in person. And this was the established form. The apartments, the staircase, and all that could be seen of the house were hung with black cloth. The Duchess, closely veiled with crape, sat upright in her state bed under a high black canopy, and at the foot stood, ranged like a row of mutes in a tragedy, the grandchildren of the deceased Duke. Profound silence reigned. The room had no light but from a single wax taper, and the condoling visitors, who curtsied in and out of it, approached the bed on tiptoe and were clothed, if relations down to the 100th cousin, in black-gloved mourning for the occasion. Terrifying scene, isn't it? Can you imagine those poor little grandchildren? On a more cheerful note, however, lighting for bedchambers was usually designed to delight and impress, enhancing its impact by all manner of objects and surfaces for the wealthy elite. This is Anna. I can only describe this as Annabelle's beautiful bed at Harwood House, and the whole room enriched with this fantastic gilding to make it shine at night. And I'm going to run through some examples. I'm sure you can think of many, many more. So this is just a sort of very brief bit of coverage. But what I really want you to do when you're looking at objects, when they're stuffed in museum cases or in dusty daylit rooms, just think of them and think, by what light was this or this intended to be seen when it was first made? And that's going to inform you a very, very great deal. So here we go. Buhl for bedchambers. The great Buhl commode now at Petworth House, one of the preeminent pieces of French furniture owned by the National Trust, which was ordered for Louis XIV's bedchamber in the Grand Trianon at Versailles in 1708, where it was intended to glow among the richest of furnishings. Now I think it looks rather dull in daylight at Petworth House, but other examples, which are in better condition, show just how marvellous it must have been when fresh and new. Equally impressive for nighttime show was Oriental lacquer and its European imitation in Japanning. And it's remarkable for the amount listed in inventories as desired for bedchambers and boudoirs in the late 17th and 18th centuries. By daylight, lacquer furniture, especially when it's aged and faded, looks dull. By candlelight, it takes on magical qualities, and this was expressed by the Japanese novelist Tanizaki in his essay In Praise of Shadows. He wrote, "Only in dim half-light is the true beauty of Japanese lacquerware revealed. In the still dimmer light of the candle stand, I gazed at trays and bowls standing in the shadows cast by that flickering point of flame, and I discovered in the gloss of this lacquerware a depth and richness like that of a still, dark pond, a beauty I had not seen before." And the English designers Stalker and Parker paid a similar, if less mellifluous, tribute in their treatise of Japanning and varnishing, published in 1688. What can be more surprising than to have our chambers overlaid with varnish more glossy and reflecting than polished marble? No amorous nymph need entertain a dialogue with her glass, or Narcissus retire to a fountain to survey his charming countenance, when the whole house is one entire speculum. This commode, one prepared by Marchand, using recycled panels of Chinese lacquer, not in its best condition, was delivered to Fontainebleau in September 1755 for the use of Queen Maria Leszczyńska and placed between the windows in her bedchamber. It's now in the Wallace collection. A few years earlier, William Linnell had provided English japanned bedroom furniture for an exotic chamber at Badminton House for the 4th Duke of Beaufort. And when protected from the damaging effects of light and dust, for instance on the inside panels of cabinet doors, which you see on the right, English japanning can still look brilliant. And even chopped up, crazy Chinese incised Coromandel lacquer screens turned into bedroom furniture can look considerably better by candlelight. I mean, this thing is an absolute horror. My husband adores it. He thinks it's wonderful. But by daylight, it's just obscene, frankly. By nightlight, it's rather good fun. Now, here are some more examples. I'm just going to run through rapidly to make you think a bit about them. Obviously, there's mother of pearl from the Rushbrook coffer of the early 17th century, which is now in the V&A, and this delicious little tiny Japanese casket of the late 16th century, which is in Portugal. Something that's really important for the night-dyed bedchamber is the clock and the watch. On the left-hand side here, quite interestingly, this is a repeating chamber clock. It's only got one winding hole, so it doesn't strike the hours, but it does have a little bell which can tinkle and which can be heard through the little perforated screen at the top of the clock case. Its silver chapter ring and its blue steel blue hands against the gold of the plate of the clock and the spandrels make this particularly clearly legible at night. I think it's really important to think about that. So if you've only got that tiny last glimmer of candle in your nighttime light or the dying embers of your fire, you could still read this clock particularly well. But on the right-hand side, it has a small string with a little knob on the end of it, which you can reach out, find and pull, because the little knob will glimmer, and it will strike the hours, the quarters, so you can tell, even in the misery of cold, dark night, that it's 3:15 and you really need to be asleep. The little piqué watch cases that you see there are also not just decoration, but they're clearly visible by low light levels. Door furniture, my Attingham students will groan when I mention this yet again, because everybody walks through doors and they never notice the handles, but I'm transfixed by them because they are the 17th, 18th, early 19th century safety material in a lowly lit room, and they needed to be bright, they needed to reflect so that you could see the door handle safely, and you didn't have a little green man in an illuminated box showing you the way out. I think they speak for themselves, but it's something really important to look out for all the time. I'm absolutely convinced, too, I'm not going to go on about ceramics because we have plenty of them, but particularly with Delftware and with Chinese blue and white ceramics, the reflective quality of cobalt and the bright and very shiny lead glazes make them particularly attractive for use in nighttime rooms. Finally, and perhaps loveliest all by candlelight, I'm going back to fabrics and to Annabelle, because the reflective quality of the materials used on those beds are truly amazing. Not just those heavenly tassels and fringes, but of course the amount of gold and silver thread woven into the cloth itself, and also, I think sometimes, the silk embroidery that you see on it. I think this is one of the most reflectively delicious beds of the 18th century. This is the one, the hangings of which were found in boxes at Cork Abbey and unused since they arrived at the house in 1734. And they're thought to have been the gift of Queen Caroline, George II's consort, to Lady Harper of Cork upon her marriage, but they probably date from earlier, about 1715, and been a gift to George I. And the Chinese silk embroidery just comes alive in nightlight with its delicate oriental scenes against a midnight blue ground, and the very, very beautiful quality of the silk embroidery, which has survived so well because these were not exposed to light for so long. So if you haven't been to see it at Cork, it's now in a glass box and in a museum presentation, but it's an absolutely stunning thing. Annabelle also illustrated the the Melville Bed, that enormous state bed which is now in the V&A, red and white. And again, it is extremely readable by candlelight. It's a wonderful thing, especially for the red and white decoration on the oyster Chinese silk inside the bed itself. Not just the textiles for the bed, but for the occupant too. This is important. And here is an exceptional combination of textiles and lacquer for a little cabinet. And this is Clement Auguste, the Prince Elector and Archbishop of Cologne, who lived from 1700 to 1761, portrayed on Déshabillé by Joseph Vivien in 1725, and then placed in his lacquer-panelled cabinet at Schloss Falkenlust outside Cologne, designed by Cuvillier and finished in 1733. And you see it in this photograph by daylight, but just shut your eyes and think of it at night. It's one of the most delicious little interiors. And perhaps even more so, these two little darlings, old favourites of mine, these two little dolls, little mannequin figures, Lord and Lady Clapham, they're referred to, from about 1690, who found their way with their nighttime clothes, as well as their daytime clothes and their chairs, into the V&A. And they're wearing their little exotic banyans in silk. And Lady C has her little silk petticoat over her nightdress, reminding us how reflective the state of undress could be. And sheet edgings and pillowcases were just as elegantly finished in the past. And I think blackwork embroidery, such as this early 17th century pillowcase in the V&A, is very readable in low light levels. And perhaps some of you could help me with this. Ages ago, and I can't remember where I read it, I believe that Catherine de Medici lay on black silk sheets. Afin de réfléchir mieux la blancheur de son peau. It's a very interesting statement indeed, and I'm very interested to know if any of you have any references to other ladies who might have been challenged by the presence of mistresses in her husband's life, lying on black silk sheets so that her skin looked whiter. I'd be really interested, so do please come back to me on it. Now, twinkling sequins or spangles are obvious examples of the intention to provide glitter and drama in the nighttime bedchamber. And although dulled with age and tarnish, the silver gilt thread and the little spangles on the eponymously named spangle bed at Knoll, made in the early 17th century, are still a very good reminder. With their silver gilt threads and little delicacy of the embroidery, now, as you can see, very carefully netted. This is an extraordinary and fascinating survival. Perhaps my favourite are these two little nightcaps, his and hers, with their silver gilt threads, their shiny silk flowers, and the tiny spangles on their heads. These are two Elizabethans who must have twinkled at each other in their bed before extinguishing their candle, taking off these delicious caps and getting down to business. Now, there are wonderful stories of great achievers who worked in bed, and really much more fun than the burning bed curtain syndrome, though I think they were all taking great risks. Thomas Hobbes, according to Aubrey, was wont to draw lines on his thigh and on the sheets a bed, and also multiply and divide. He also sang, I think, very loudly and rather badly in bed. Rousseau, Voltaire, Addison, Macaulay, Trollope, Napoleon and Churchill all wrote in bed. Rossini and Donizetti composed, sometimes running off the paper and onto the sheets. Groucho Marx disliked being there without doing anything very much. And Mrs. Patrick Campbell famously wrote of the deep, deep peace of the double bed after the hurly-burly of the chaise longue. These bedtime stories are wonderful, and I hope that you will continue to enjoy them. I just wanted to add as a postscript, and this is really important, I think, to remember. The arrival of electricity for the bedchamber not only brought increased illumination, but for the first time, it really brought safety to the nighttime bedchamber. This is a rather suggestive lampshade in a nursery at Minley Manor, Fleet, in about 1902. And on the right-hand side, one of the glorious original early bits of electric lighting at Blackwell, up in the Lake District, which is one of my favourite arts and crafts houses. So keep looking, if necessary by candlelight. Try the experiment yourself. Light one candle and see what you can see, but sit in the dark for 4 minutes beforehand, and then light another, and then put a bit of mirror glass behind, and start to work out which colours you see first, how far you can see, and what you can do. But please do it safely. Thank you very much.